what we did 100,000 years ago and what modern day hunter-gatherers are doing is nothing like what we're faced with now. Just leave that in the past. What you can garner from that style of living is that, sure, it's really good to get tons and tons and tons of physical activity and get tons and tons and tons of unprocessed food.
This is Generation Health. We bring you the latest news, cutting-edge research, and time-tested best practices helping you live a longer, healthier life. With me, Joey DiMatteo, PharmD, board-certified clinical nutritionist. How you doing?
Doing great.
Did you have to sit in front of a board when you got certified? Were there
no
a bunch of people? It was just tests?
Yeah, tests. Then the board certified me.
That's very gracious of them.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to sit in front of an actual board. That sounds intimidating.
They're like, tell us about protein.
Yes.
What do you want to know?
Yeah.
Josiah Schweinberg, engineer extraordinaire, microphone number 3. How you doing, buddy?
Doing good.
Fun fact, I know that women actually have more testosterone than estrogen in just strict literal amounts.
It's hard to believe. Women actually naturally make more testosterone
That's what
than
I
estrogen.
said.
Yes.
I'm glad you're learning from me. You're riffing off of my...
I was repeating it for emphasis.
Point.
Hey, guess what? Women make more testosterone than men.
More emphasis.
Did you know that?
You guys are learning.
Oh.
Yes.
I'm glad I could...
Now, in volume, it is not, in magnitude, it does not compare to men. So,
yes.
But we're just talking relative terms because estrogen gets all the attention and rightfully so, it fluctuates. But testosterone is very important too. And that's what we're here to talk about today.
Okay. So then let's talk about women and testosterone, their levels and how that works.
Yeah. So, testosterone is foundational in women. It's not optional. Okay. And I think that's just, again, emphasizing the importance of it. It drives sexual function, mood, energy, confidence, and metabolism.
All the same things it does in men.
All of those things.
It's amazing.
Shockingly, yes. And I think what's interesting in women, it's not so much about, that aggression and things like that. It's really that without it, when it's low in women feel kind of disconnected, kind of dimmed, flat, not necessarily depressed, but a little more flat. Okay. When women typically, have their free their free testosterone checked. So yeah, when women, have the optimal level of testosterone, you often hear things like, I finally feel myself again. So it really comes from, why is that the case? Because testosterone is known as the male hormone. Okay. But we know that women need it just at a different level. So I think what's important to understand when we get into, we'll kind of start with the testing, maybe some of the drier stuff here to start, but free testosterone is the only meaningful number. Okay. Total testosterone is kind of a blunt, misleading number.
Okay. So you're saying there's multiple numbers that you might get from a testosterone test.
And a lot of times, and we'll kind of go into, more into why and maybe how it occurs, but total testosterone is what's most likely to be checked. And again, we're speaking specifically about women here. Okay. So we want to extrapolate this out. This is for women. But total testosterone includes testosterone that is bound to sex hormone binding globulin. We'll call it SHBG and albumin. Okay. Bound testosterone is inactive.
Okay.
All right. And women typically have high levels of SHBG. Okay. So if you test total and you've got a woman with high SHBG, and we'll get into maybe what can cause that and why it's so common, normal levels of total, not normal from a symptomology standpoint. Okay. Free testosterone is what's free and active, able to do its job. Okay. That reflects the true biological activity. That's the direct correlation with libido, energy, motivation, workout response, mood, drive, emotional resilience.
Okay, so if you're getting tested, the only number that really is relevant is the free testosterone.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, and what's also critical here in the lab itself, and what labs are done, immunoassays. We won't go into the technical stuff, but immunoassay is the standard testosterone test. Okay, if you just order. Your doctor just prescribes you to have your testosterone tested. It's specifically not going to have to mention that it's an immunoassay, but that's the default. So that's typically what's done unless it says otherwise. Chromatography. So we'll just, again, use abbreviations, LC or MS. That's the gold standard. Okay, it's highly sensitive at low concentration ranges, which given what we're dealing with in women versus men, and that's why, again, this is a women-specific discussion about the importance of how it's done. That's the gold standard. That's what's used in research and in HRT clinics and precise labs. So you can go to Quest with, or your standard major lab with a prescription for testosterone to get your blood work drawn. They're going to use immunoassays typically, unless it's specifically noted. And so if you have results currently and you're looking at them, if it doesn't say that it was LC or MS, it is an immunoassay. And the issue with that, again, is that it is essentially not a very worthwhile number. And so you may be told that your numbers are fine. So we've got the layer of the total versus free.
Right.
Maybe even you got the free. If it's the immunoassay, it doesn't hold as much weight. It's not the gold standard of testing.
Is that true also for men, just out of curiosity, or because they're higher concentrations, is it more reliable for a man?
It is. And again, I not going into the details of
Right.
that now, because I'd like to kind of have that for a separate, but it's much more because of the sensitivity.
Right.
Basically can just mean it can
Very low
more
levels.
accurately test very low levels. It's more important.
Okay. All right. So LC or MS, you want to see that specifically on your test.
Yes, exactly. So back to the SHBG.
Sex hormone binding globulin.
Yes. That high SHBG is what silently, and I use the word silently again because the total does not take that into account. So your total may be high, but if your SHBG is high, that's silently destroying the libido and energy, et cetera, that you get with testosterone. So it has a high affinity for testosterone. And so you're going to have the lower free test. Okay. And then I think what's critical here is you say that's kind of, it means something, but what do you do with that? What causes high SHBG? Birth control pills.
Oh,
Okay. SSRIs,
okay.
thyroid issues, including low free T3, low protein intake, excessive alcohol intake, chronic stress.
Wow.
So the magnitude of what causes those, can vary, but just look at the things that were named that elevates SHBG in women. Significant. So again, back to tie it together. If you're getting just a total tested, not the free, that is why it's so important, because the factors that raise SHBG are so significant and prevalent.
Yeah. That list is kind of that hits a whole lot of folks.
Exactly.
Wow.
And then the kind of last layer on the testing is that free T3 is really in the high normal range. And we talk about that with the hormones a lot. This is not about, we really want you to be way above. No, we're looking at the normal range, but the low end of the normal range versus the high end, there can definitely be a significant difference, even though you're still in the normal. 2 to 4 is really where you want to be to kind of restore that energy, mood, strength, libido, etc.
Okay. So 2 to 4, that's the number you're looking for?
Yes.
What is it? 2 to 4 what?
2 to 4 picograms per ml.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. But that can certainly be important, but yes.
And you said that's the higher end of what's considered normal
range. Yes. So we're not talking about super therapeutic levels.
Does it change over as like, I know for men, your testosterone levels can kind of naturally decline as you age. Is that true for women as well?
There are some changes as we go. Yes. Not nearly to the extent that men experience. Both either in magnitude or in percentage, but yes, it's a factor. There's obviously a lot of hormonal changes going on in women. So we touched on this already, but chronic cortisol suppresses ovarian function, which suppresses testosterone function. Stress also raises the SHBG. Mm-hmm. Dieting, extremely low fat eating. Yep. Testosterone does require cholesterol to be made. So if you're on an extreme, again, we're talking extreme low fat eating, that's going to have an effect as well. Overtraining probably doesn't apply to nearly as many people, but constant cardio, constant cortisol. So it's really overtraining in that realm, in the cardio realm, suppresses androgens. Strength training, which we'll get to, does the opposite.
Yes.
Okay. So complete flip there. Again, we're talking about women, but there certainly are some parallels.
Yep.
Low vitamin D, low zinc, low iron, low magnesium, all can contribute to decreased androgen synthesis as well. So there's, again, a lot of factors of how the level gets out of whack in women.
Okay. I'm kind of struck by the things you're saying, the number of ways that women can start to develop and experience the lowered testosterone effects. It's kind of overwhelming. And it seems like that might be almost a, dare I say, ubiquitous issue in society.
And, we try to stay in the middle here typically. And so I'm the things I've read already about some of the symptoms of low T in women. I'm going to read them again, kind of to emphasize, but this is not, well, that's the answer to everything. I want to emphasize because I'm saying these important things and they are a factor. Still don't want to, have this be the headline that just get your test checked and everything's fine.
Right.
But I just like kind of tying everything together. You may be on or have a history of being on oral contraceptives. You may also be on SSRI or one or the other. High stress, again, I know that's normal. Your thyroid may be something you've always been working on. Then when you add in the symptoms with it, it can just be a piece to the puzzle. So low libido certainly is a major one. Fatigue. And it's back to kind of that like flattening that women feel when their testosterone is very low can often be labeled as depression. A lot of times women are also going through the other changes hormonally in life, which can contribute and muddy this whole thing. But overall, it still can be, maybe a help to you instead of straight to the SSRI if it's more of the fatigue and kind of that flatness. Brain fog, again, is often dismissed as like that early menopause but it can also definitely have a relationship to both your testosterone level and thyroid as well.
Well, and just because it's early menopause doesn't mean it's not low testosterone. That's what's happening is all your hormones are fluctuating and changing, and that makes sense. Okay,
yes.
Keep talking. Sorry.
Muscle loss, again, is typically blamed on hormonal changes other than testosterone, blamed on aging. Certainly there's a factor as we're aging and maybe you haven't been doing any strength training for maybe what was 5 or 10 years, turns into 10 or 20 before you know it. That all plays in, but androgen decline certainly is playing a role on top of the obvious one, lack of resistance training. Again, the flatness is a major thing. This isn't just, mood. It's related potentially to what's going on with you biologically.
Yeah. Wow. So lots of women probably being, treated with medications when they just need to have some metabolic tests done, some hormone tests done before jumping to these conclusions.
Yes. And I think too, there's a whole kind of list I have here about whenever you get these hormones tested, that if it's a more comprehensive panel, that you can really start to pin down exactly what's going on. And I don't think maybe some of those details are necessarily all that important, but just understanding that the interplay with these hormones is critical. We talked about the total testosterone being related to the SHBG, and that free is really what matters. DHEA, if you have your DHEA leveled, which is another form of androgen, a much lower potency one, can show, if there's a major stress contribution. I mean, again, we all feel stress, but what's going on with your body adrenally and hormonally? How much is it having a lab provable impact? Free T3 critical as well. Estrogen and progesterone, it gives you a whole picture of what's going on. Also, so again, iron levels that we talked about can be related to energy. So when you have, I guess my ultimate point here is that working with a practitioner who is comfortable in this realm to not just know maybe what testosterone test to do, the LSMC, but also just understanding the interplay. And that maybe if the free T3 is being checked and we're dealing with some of the estradiol, that you can start to correct this as a puzzle versus just throwing the testosterone piece. You kind of hear this and just jump right into, oh, I want this testosterone checked. Well, there may be, instead of just adding testosterone, maybe as a supplement or compound or whatever, that there's some things you can do to maybe get the whole picture, the whole puzzle better.
Makes sense. That makes sense. Knowing these numbers, having these sorts of measurements is so critical. You can't, what gets measured gets managed is what I've heard said in the business world. But I mean, that makes sense here too.
Yes. So, I think what ultimately this is leading to is get your hormones checked, maybe go on some BHRT replacement therapy. And it doesn't necessarily, there's nothing wrong with doing that. But there are some other ways that you can at least help your body to naturally have increased free testosterone. So one way is by reducing that SHBG, because even if your total testosterone don't get any movement there, you're not supplementing, putting on a testosterone cream or anything. If you can lower the SHBG, then by default, you are increasing the free available testosterone. More lean protein is a critical one.
Yep.
SHBG stabilizes in protein-fed states. Healthy fats are critical as well. Correct thyroid issues, for especially free T3, iron deficiency, get that corrected. These all are going to lower SHBG and then ultimately increase what's available in the free test. Reduce alcohol, reduce SSRIs, make sure that it's clinically appropriate. We're not against them by any means for any purpose, but at the same time, if it's maybe something that hasn't been giving you the benefit, especially if it's more for that fatigue, for that flattening. If you have not been getting the benefit, maybe now reevaluate if it's clinically appropriate and maybe start to deal with things more hormonally at a base level with your diet, with resistance training, start to put it together that way, because maybe you're taking a medication that's making those things worse potentially if that wasn't the actual cause. And it can just be a time to reevaluate, again, just based on what you're taking it for.
Okay.
Strength training is critical. Free testosterone rises when your muscles are demanding estrogen signaling, period. So I know for a lot of women, it's difficult to kind of jump into that. There's a lot of available resources. It doesn't have to turn into free weights and big weightlifting. That's more Dante's wheelhouse. But I think just understanding that doing some type of resistance, some type of training is going to make a major impact, not just related to what we're talking about, but across your health spectrum.
Yeah, osteoporosis and osteopenia, also your blood sugar, all those things. Yes.
Absolutely. So again, I think healthy fats, again, testosterone is made from healthy fats and healthy cholesterol. Low fat diets, are definitely something that's still very prevalent. So just understanding it's not about, eating a bunch more red meat. It's eggs, salmon, avocado, those, have some source of cholesterol in them and have the healthy fats. Sleep is critical as well. Stress, this is men and women. Stress and poor sleep kills free testosterone. DHEA in women converts to testosterone. In men, it just doesn't do enough to make any type of impact. But for women, 5 to 10 milligrams can just be a direct way to take a precursor. It can also help with adrenals as well, to help balance out cortisol. Remember, DHA and cortisol are those that you want to have kind of in counterbalance to each other.
Yeah.
But even without testing it, if you do a low dose, like a 5 milligram, it converts to testosterone in peripheral tissues, can be an option. If you are already postmenopausal, because of, again, DHA's role as a precursor, you can go up to more like 15 or 25. So just depending on what stage you're in, early stages, more 5 to 10. If you're in that post-menopause phase where you're not making nearly as much across the board, you can go up to 15 or 25.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, we're talking about this because, obviously testosterone in women does not get anywhere near as much attention as estrogen in women does.
Yes.
And even that doesn't get nearly enough attention, but nevertheless, testosterone is a major component in everybody's health, but for women, it can have all these downstream effects. Lots and lots and lots of things can affect not just your testosterone levels, but also the SBGH levels, which then counterbalance your testosterone levels. All of these things need to be considered, taken into account. You have to get your testing done to find out where your levels are. And while supplementing with testosterone, compounded or something like that might be a great solution for a lot of people, it might not be necessary because there are all kinds of other things, lifestyle things, supplemental things that can be done to help reduce your SBGH levels and increase your free testosterone and help get you that joie de vivre, that
Look at this
coming alive
wrap-up.
thing.
You just had.
Did I do it? Did I do it?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
Joie de vivre.
And I know he had mentioned it, but I didn't want this to turn into, well, the testosterone's a big problem. So the only thing, if you're feeling any of these symptoms, that you just need to go get it checked and get it that may be where you go.
Right.
But just understand the whole puzzle and understand that sleep, that reducing alcohol consumption, that maybe an oral contraceptive that you're on or an SSRI is contributing. Eating more protein, eating more healthy fats, and number one, strength training, some type of resistance training. All of those can help to, they're going to help the testosterone alone, but they're going to help a lot more than that. But just reevaluate these things and understand. And then the next layer is there's nothing wrong with going to a practitioner that will test them properly, look at the whole picture. And again, we're not talking about, boosting androgen, boosting testosterone to the point where, you're in these levels that are pushing men. We're talking normal. The most controversial thing about the level I mentioned was that it's on the high end of the normal. That's all we're talking about here.
Right. Yeah, the difference in levels between men and women cannot be overstated. It's orders of magnitude.
And we're still saying that the women level's fine. Just research shows just at the high end of it. That's all.
You just got to watch about the joie de vivre,
Joie de vivre.
We're going to have to cut that and put that on something.
What do we got on deck? You wanted to talk about, you're reading a book.
Yeah, it's interesting how dots connect. Reading a new book by Herman Poncer, the anthropologist from Pennsylvania, I believe. We talked about his old book some years back, his first book, Burn, which talked about more or less the energy expenditure amongst hunter-gatherer communities, specifically the Hadza tribe, which Josiah remembers near and dear.
That was one of my favorite videos you've ever done.
I think it took us like 12 hours to film 1 hour.
Oh, but it was so good.
It was fun.
It's still up there.
Well, of course it's
I'm sure.
there.
Yeah, go look at it.
Yeah.
That was cool.
The Hadza tribe.
Point being, yeah, I find him incredibly insightful. So started reading his new book, and then sure enough, I had a friend ask me a question, just sort of a dietary related question. I find myself referring back to the energy expenditure thing often because of what I learned in with his papers and in his book. But specifically this question, in addition to asking about fast, we can present the question, but talking about fasting and then dovetailed into, well, what about this style of dieting? What about the paleo diet? What about the carnivore diet, the caveman? I'm just like, whoa, okay. So again, interesting just how those things connect.
Yep.
With him being an anthropologist, we can talk a little bit about sort of his spin on things and better help me answer the question.
So the question was, hey, I've been feeling crappy and want to get back on track. I think everybody's felt that before.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on a 72-hour fast or some sort of detox? My body weight has been pretty steady and with what I'm currently doing, but I was thinking about following some sort of carnivore or caveman type diet to maintain or even lose a few pounds. All right. So this is I believe a guy.
Yes.
And what age?
He's about my age.
Okay, so
early 30s.
All right.
Has kids, has a demanding job, very, I think, relatable to a chunk of our audience.
Yeah.
So, yes, don't have his full medical history, anything like that. I consider this person a friend, but again, these conversations do come up frequently, and so I think it's a good one to unpack.
So he wants to know about the diet and how does this relate to Herman Poncer?
How does this relate to Herman Poncer?
Yeah.
I wanted to use his question about the paleo diet specifically to talk about what at least some of the details of what an actual Paleolithic diet looks like.
Okay, so he said the caveman diet, meaning the paleo diet, paleo style. What is that my understanding, maybe we'll start there. My understanding is paleo diet is ostensibly things a caveman would have eaten. So you're talking about fresh fruits and vegetables and meat, nothing processed, anything that ostensibly could be cooked over a fire. Is that about the summation?
Yeah. On their website, because I had to kind of jump back a little bit too. On their website, they say, hey, it's actually pretty simple. Before people started organized farming and manufacturing foods, humans ate what was available to them in nature. And since we humans have spent a whole lot more time eating what we found than what we farmed or made, our bodies naturally prefer less processed, less industrialized foods. So that is sort of what I found interesting. You know, everyone assumes that they know. They look at fruits and vegetables and bananas and, you know, leafy greens and just assume like, yeah, that's what we were eating 10,000 years ago, a million years ago.
Right.
And my understanding based upon some of different papers from Herman Poncer was that that's just simply not the case. Sure, they were not eating processed foods, obviously.
Right.
But their blueberries are different than our berries. Their starches are different than our starches. The nutritional makeup of some large game that they hunted down is much different than the large game, so to speak, that's even farm raised in this day and age.
Yeah.
And so those kind of things just, again, this isn't to bash the paleo diet either.
Close this because I just want to listen. Yes.
It's not that I want to bash the paleo diet, because I think any sort of pattern that nudges us towards less processed foods, I think is a good one.
Yep.
And so I think I just want to mention that at the outset. I think they're doing a noble thing and just nudging people towards that. But at the same time, we can't truly eat what our ancestors ate. It's just not feasible. And even trying to standardize or try to make a summation of what, people ate 100,000 years ago varies differently based upon where there's temporal changes. What was their climate like? Where were they at a given time? So many different factors. Maybe they lived in colder temperatures and they had much less access to vegetables. So obviously they weren't eating tons of plants and leaves and such.
Right.
And they did just fine. And then on the flip side, you have somebody who maybe lived more towards the equator or maybe an African tribe or something more akin to current day hunter-gatherers. Well, they have more of a mix of certain things. And then depending on the time of year, they're eating more meat, less meat. They eat things called tubers, which is essentially their fibrous vegetable. It's just really impossible to distill all of that down to the paleo diet.
So to some extent, there's no possible way to replicate the Paleolithic diet. Even if we were to simplify it down and just say, forget about regional variation, forget about climate change or whatever over the course of 100,000 years, we're talking about a generalized Paleolithic style because of all of the changes in the world. That's just not a thing.
Exactly.
Okay. But what about the premise? I mean, you said eating less processed food is a good thing.
Yes, definitely.
So what's wrong with, okay, it's got a bad name, but what should we be doing? What's the benefit? What's the point? Why is this interesting?
So good question. Nobody, I think in 2025 is at least that I could find is bashing the paleo diet at this point anymore. I think this was more of an early 2010s sort of movement, kind of akin to the CrossFit come up. I think, maybe I'm speaking to something again that's not the most current, but again, I just see it in a different sense. I mean, with this person I talked to, they mentioned it, maybe not even fully aware of what they meant by it. They just, again, they almost just referenced it in terms of hey, I know I need to get away from processed foods. And so again, that's what's the point? I think that's the point. I think diets like this have nudged us towards at least the thought process of trying to avoid what's most available to us.
Yeah, we're figuring out that the standard American diet just is not a good idea.
Right. And so if you look at earlier hominins, or they'll call it, or even living apes, their diet is dictated by what's most available to them.
Sure.
And most of those populations, and even if we fast forward to current current day hunter gatherers, they are way less likely to have all of the different, the maladies that we're accustomed to: heart disease, diabetes, cancer, age-related sarcopenia. They're way less prone to those things. In essence, what I see is us doing the same sort of thing. We are just consuming what is most available to us, and we are not evolved enough to handle or process the unprocessed foods, so to speak. So we're just, things sped up way too fast.
We have eclipsed our physiological capacity to keep up.
Right.
That we have intellectually created a world that our bodies are not suited for.
Yep.
Fascinating.
Yep. Things sped up way too fast. We became way too advanced. Technology's advanced with the way we prepare foods, and simply hunting and the emergence of fire and all of those sorts of things made such a massive difference. Things just, that was like the fork in the road, that once we got that down, we hit the ground running as a species.
Absolutely.
So,
and I don't want to go back, just to be clear.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I think it's very tempting to just generally look back on, I mean, again, as if we know exactly what our ancestors were doing or what the earliest living apes were doing. It's just, we just reduce things. We try to reduce things down into very understandable, ways to process the past. So,
right. So there's a lot of speculation. We don't know anything for sure. What's really getting you fired up about this?
Good question. What I find interesting, again, is just the apples to oranges comparison of just the food types of the past, So for example, in the paleo diet, they recommend against the consumption of grains. So you should be getting most of your carbohydrates from fruits and vegetables. You don't need to be eating rice or potatoes. And that's a whole other conversation. I find any sort of restriction like that to be sometimes counterproductive for people. But that's neither here nor there. The point is, depending on the location, depending on the specific tribe, depending on the specific group of hunter-gatherers, there are multiple instances where grains were a high percentage of a given dietary pattern.
Right.
There were certain groups that were based, I think I heard, based on grindstones that they were finding, that they were, using it, they were processing it.
They were
basically
processing grains.
They were to bake different things, to make different, almost like flour, essentially. So it's just doesn't make any sense knowing that then when looking at a paleo diet, you immediately, or like the current paleo diet, that you create these restrictive parameters. Although that's one sliver, it's just that right there troubles me a little bit.
Okay.
Now, if they want to make the argument that, hey, domesticated rice nowadays, so rice now versus rice back then is different. Now the way that we process rice is so if you compare it to wild rice, the energy content in what we have is much higher.
Sure.
The fiber is much lower than what's in what's, so to speak, when you're talking about wild rice.
Higher calories, lower fiber.
Yes. And what does that sound like?
That sounds like the standard American diet.
Right. So we've become really good through our different farming practices and different processing techniques to make things more energy dense.
Yeah.
And that's very similar to how when hunting for food for survival, that you're trying to find something that is sort of the most bang for your buck.
Yep.
It's if these different groups of people have to get by for a long time on tubers and leaves and stems, they will.
Right.
And they create they've often, I know I say I could be more specific, but you'll hear that they'll create backstock of those sort of things in the event that the small game has sort of dried up or the large game has dried up. So it's, if anything, the paleo diet to me is just massive amounts of flexibility.
Yeah.
That's the paleo diet.
Interesting.
So if you find yourself at home and, you have oats and rice and you're trying to follow this diet and you're like, well, shoot, what am I supposed to do? I would say just go for the rice, go for the oats. It's okay. The grains are going to be okay in that instance. And, be adaptable enough to choose that versus, it's always like, what's the alternative? So I chose that versus the processed cereal, or I chose that versus the mac and cheese. That's our current environment.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's the element of what's the most affordable, what's your living situation. So I want to be sensitive to those things.
Sure.
Processed foods have created cheaper alternatives, and there's no denying that.
Yeah.
Are they the best quality across the board? Obviously not.
Right.
But when you're trying to, think about the food deserts and the, lack of access that certain people have, it's an important, part of the conversation. So if you're somebody who has the means, you have the time, you have the resources, it is, if you want to be like your ancestors, be flexible like they were, learn to navigate on your toes when you're at a restaurant ordering this versus that. Or, if you haven't had tons of, junk this week, if you are out with your family, be adaptable enough to know, hey, it's okay to bump up my intake on a Saturday night.
Yeah.
Like that to me is my idealistic sense of what at least this point in time, the only way we can kind of navigate the current situation, because our situation is never going to be like the hunter-gatherers. And so it's very hard to...
We don't have to hunt
hopefully not.
or gather. Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, that's one of the big differences is I have yet to stalk an elk,
right,
or a mammoth, and I have never picked a berry off a tree and eat... Well, that's not true. Okay. I have rarely picked berries off of a tree and eaten them. Mm-hmm. So the idea that we will be able to mimic that. And the other thing is the localized reality of food availability 100 years ago, let alone 10,000 years ago. I don't want to go back to a time when having an orange meant that you had to be in a tropical climate. I like being able to get oranges in Pittsburgh at any time of year. I think that's pretty fantastic. I like raspberries quite a bit, and they don't always grow in all the places. Or let me go the other direction. I live in Nashville, and in Nashville, they don't believe in rhubarb. Now, to all my Yankee friends and people in England, I'm sorry. But they don't believe in rhubarb. But I can get rhubarb in Nashville because of all of the modern agriculture and farming practices and the restaurant. I want that. I don't want to give that up. So the idea of having some flexibility is actually pretty cool. Sticks with what I feel is normal.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I don't know.
Definitely.
That's the end of my sermon today.
No, I think that's good stuff. I know I mentioned the rice as an example.
Yeah.
But if, it's so common to hear people say, well, I'm buying grass-fed, farm-raised beef, whatever.
Yeah.
Like I
free range beef.
Yes, all those sorts of things, which I'm not debating that's fine. That's a fine choice. Sure, go for it. All things being equal, if you look at the meat of, the nutrient content of wild game that's caught versus even farm raised, grass fed sort of things, there's going to be way less saturated fat. There's way less fat within the muscle of a given cut of meat versus what we're farming and, kind of doing on our own.
Yep.
And so if you say, I'm going to do the paleo diet and eat more meat because that's what I heard that this one specific subset of my ancestors were doing, that makes sense. I'm just going to up the meat content.
Right.
What if what you're choosing is a form of meat that you assume is going to be really healthy? You're eating a ton of it, and it's really high in saturated fat. It's really high in this or that. It just creates what does it do to people? It's kind of leads them astray. Mm-hmm. It's not really, and maybe I'm too hung up on that, but I just don't like that. I'd rather just be told like, hey, what we did 100,000 years ago and what modern day hunter gatherers are doing is nothing like what we're faced with now. So just leave that in the past. What you can garner from that style of living is that, sure, it's really good to get tons and tons and tons of physical activity and get tons and tons and tons of unprocessed food. And be able to adapt on the fly. That's the name of the game. Not like no grains because of this one set of hominins that they, in their specific climate, they only ate this and they only ate that. That is so ridiculous and is historically false.
So is that the advice you gave your friend?
No. That was for this was for the sake of discussion.
Said keto or bust.
Right. Yeah. The advice that I gave him, even just thinking back to his question, at first we ended up talking about the whole fasting thing.
Yeah.
More than anything. I just wanted to understand where his head was at with that sort of intervention. But with a lot of people, they're disenchanted with how they're feeling. Maybe they had a, weekend or a couple weekends in a row of birthday parties and they didn't grocery shop, and they're just, that feeling.
Oh yeah.
And so I get
I felt it 2 days ago.
Yeah. And so I get the reaction of, well, let me just cut my intake down completely and let me detoxify and let me fast. And you jump to these, things you see on social media, or you just jump to the extreme to try to make up for lost time or make up for something that you did. And while I am certainly not void of those feelings as well, I just think trying to help somebody, that's just not the long-term play. I think that in practice, when you do have a kind of an all-out weekend of eating and excess calories and such, I think that there's no reason to cut back the next day. Or if you're not super hungry breakfast the next day or super hungry for lunch the next day, I don't think it's the end of the world to just kind of like, not,
you mean
force your
artificially cut back.
Yes.
Like top down intensely, meaning I think you were just going to say it, that if you instinctively feel like you're just not as hungry, just let it ride.
Yeah. Just because you eat, eggs and toast every morning, if you're not feeling it, and that's kind of like maybe a good cue to listen to. You're loaded up on calories from the day prior. That, I guess the only reason I say that is as far as I'm willing to go in terms of like making up for lost time, compensatory eating, fasting. Like that is nowhere near fasting.
Right.
That is as far as I'm willing to go with people, because anecdotally, I think that's what happens to me. And it's always this ebb and flow.
Sure.
Back to Herman Poncer, that you're burning a consistent amount of calories, and it's hard to get out of that constrained window.
Yep.
And you also know that once you sort of are at a set point of body weight, you are hardwired to maintain that over the long term.
Yep.
So not over the next week, but over the next several months, there are going to be days and weeks where you're really hungry and really full and really so just lean into that. And just because you're not super hungry after a weekend of a ton of eating, just don't eat as much. You don't need to go on a 72-hour fast, for goodness sake. I just don't. I'm willing to be proven wrong for sure, but I just think that creates nothing but then a rebound effect on the flip side. So what do you do? So it's like, what do you do after the 72 hours of barely eating or not eating or only drinking blended up carrots, for goodness sake? What's the flip side of that? And how do you transition back into the real world?
Because you're talking to a friend who said he was happy where he was at with his body weight.
Sure.
But what you're saying, if I'm understanding correctly, the notion that you can easily shift your body weight is not accurate. It is difficult, and physiologically your body is going to fight against you by making you more hungry, by making you move less, all of those things. It takes a supraphysiological action to change the natural physiology.
100%. Yep.
Why are you even here? I could just do this show.
I mean, that's just how, I want to reference studies and I want to talk about those sorts of things in greater detail, but you just see that's the way that it plays out for most people. I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah.
They don't maybe necessarily realize what's going on under the hood when those ebbs and flows occur, but it's very much a reality. And so in his case, 72-hour fast. What do you think? What about a detox? I want to get back on track. Well, hey, let's hold off on that. And then, what were you thinking about this whole paleo thing? Were you thinking like you bought pizza too many times last week and you wanted to go grocery shopping? You wanted to talk about maybe some things that would be better to buy, that are cheaper, easier to prepare if you're not a, culinary expert. Those are the really, I think, practical things that, him and I ultimately discussed. But, again, for the sake of discussion, Herman Poncer, adaptable, the Paleolithic era, those things are way more fun to talk about.
Well, and they're also the underlying structure that eventually leads to the rather short and pithy answer of, here's how you do it.
Yeah. So, again, I was encouraged to hear if you're in the same boat and you're thinking, maybe I do need to make a dietary change and I need to at least temporarily align myself with something that's more of a fad. I think, hey, if that gets the wheels churning and you go to the Paleo website and you start to read what they're about, that's fine. Again, they're encouraging eating a diet of ultimately less processed foods.
And that's something we agree on.
We definitely agree. But again, I think it's easier said than done to do that. Yeah.
So it sounds like, once again, what you're saying is paleo diet, lovely, not really a realistic representation of Paleolithic man, or woman, but a good idea and concept and a noble goal. We should all move that direction, even if we're not as hardcore as they might like. And you said what is the name of the book you're reading?
So reading Adaptable, but the specific article that I referenced some stuff was from more of the Burn era. And so the article, we'll link it, is Effects of Evolution, Ecology, and Economy on Human Diet, Insights from Hunter-Gatherers and Other Small-Scale Societies. And if I could summarize it quickly, it is, again, paleo diets or ancestral type diets, caveman diet, whatever you want to call it, is all fine and dandy. Again, nudges you towards a minimally processed diet, which is great. Way easier said than done. Way oversimplifies the way in which we get there. But there is no shortage of examples in here of how this is wildly different than any singular ancestral paleo caveman type diet. Don't listen to what anybody says about their specific ancestral diet. Just read this, and there's enough in here to understand that.
Fair enough. Awesome. I love that. That was great. And I look forward to hearing more about Adaptable by Dr. Herman Poncer. Well, that's it for us today.
Tune in. Schwa Davy.
If you learned anything, we'd love for you to drop a comment down below, leave a thumbs up, like the episode, or share it with somebody that you know, somebody that needs to know this. Hey, that's 51% of the population. Everybody needs to know these things. This is critical stuff. If you've got a question, email us questions@askjoedimatteo.com. That's AskJoedimatteo.com. Yes, I spell it that way in my brain at night when I'm sleeping. That website is also where you can find past episodes of this show or any of the supplements we sell. Joey mentioned DHEA. That's there. We have that available on our website. Go check it out. Big thanks as ever to everybody that makes this happen. Joey? That's Joey. That's Josiah. I'm Tyler, and we'll talk to you next time.